Elena Vasquez stepped through the shimmering portal and into the most incredible room she had ever seen. The Galactic Council chamber stretched high above her head, reaching toward the stars themselves. Massive columns of crystal and metal supported a dome that showed the swirling colors of space. She was the first human to stand in this place, representing all of Earth. Around her, hundreds of alien beings filled floating platforms and special chambers. Some looked like walking trees made of crystal that sang instead of talked. Others were clouds of gas trapped in clear boxes, glowing different colors as they spoke. Giant metal creatures stood perfectly still, their red eyes watching everything. Elena had studied them all, but seeing them in person made her heart race. She wore her best diplomatic uniform, dark blue with silver buttons that caught the strange light. Her translator device hung around her neck, a small box that would turn alien words into English and her words into sounds the aliens could understand. It had taken Earth's best scientists 5 years to build it. A voice filled the chamber, speaking in musical tones that her translator changed into words. Welcome, human representative, to the Galactic Council. I am Prime Harmonizer Zethkari, speaker for all civilized beings in this galaxy. Elena looked up at a floating ball of pure light, brighter than a star, but somehow gentle on her eyes. Energy danced inside it like lightning trapped in glass. This was the leader of 847 different alien species, all living together in peace. Thank you for this honor, Elena said, her voice steady despite her nerves. Earth is grateful to join the galactic community. You must understand, Zethkari continued, that membership comes with great responsibility. For 300 years we have maintained perfect peace through the doctrine of harmonious coexistence. All conflicts are resolved through discussion and compromise. War is, how do you say, not possible among civilized beings. Elena nodded. She had read about this doctrine during her trip to the council station. It was amazing, nearly 1,000 different species, and none of them fought wars anymore. They talked through every problem until they found answers that made everyone happy. Earth scientists called it impossible, but here it was. We would like to learn more about this peace, Elena said carefully. Humans are still learning how to live without conflict. Several aliens made sounds that her translator called laughter, though it sounded like wind chimes and whale songs. The metal beings simply stared with their glowing eyes. Of course, Zethkari said warmly. All young species struggle with primitive behaviors. Time and wisdom will teach your people better ways. For now, Earth is granted probationary membership. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Probationary? A temporary status while you prove your commitment to peace. Your species will receive limited trading rights and scientific knowledge. When you demonstrate true understanding of civilized behavior, full membership will follow. No species has ever failed this test. An alien that looked like a walking flower with too many eyes floated forward. The Council has prepared generous territorial grants for human expansion. 12 uninhabited star systems in the outer regions, complete with planets suitable for your biological needs. Elena looked at the holographic star map that appeared in the air. 12 systems was more space than Earth had ever dreamed of claiming. Most of the planets showed green markers, meaning humans could live there without special equipment. It was incredibly generous. This is far more than we expected, Elena said honestly. What must Earth do to earn such gifts? Simply exist peacefully, Zethkari replied. Contribute to galactic knowledge and culture. Trade fairly with other species. Resolve any conflicts through proper diplomatic channels. These things come naturally to civilized beings. Elena spent the next hour learning about council procedures. Every decision required discussion among all 847 species. Special computers translated every word into thousands of different languages and communication methods. Some aliens spoke with lights, others with chemical smells, and a few used magnetic fields. The translation process alone took most species decades to master. The aliens showed her records of their greatest achievements, cities built inside stars where plasma beings could live comfortably, planets transformed into perfect gardens for species that needed specific atmospheres, space stations the size of moons where hundreds of different aliens worked together on scientific research. "Violence is simply inefficient," explained a delegate that looked like a walking crystal formation. "Why fight when you can discuss? Why destroy when you can create? Your species will understand this in time." Elena wondered what these peaceful beings would think of Earth's history. Humans had fought wars for thousands of years. They had weapons that could destroy entire planets. Even now, Earth's military remained ready to fight anyone who threatened their world. But maybe the aliens were right. Maybe war really was just a primitive phase that species eventually outgrew. Looking around the chamber at all these different beings working together, Elena felt hope that humanity could learn to be better. As the formal ceremonies ended, Elena was assigned quarters in the diplomatic section of the station. Her rooms overlooked the main docking bay where ships from across the galaxy came and went. Some vessels were made of living wood, others looked like flowing water held in invisible bottles. A few ships seemed to be made of pure light. That night, Elena reviewed her mission briefings. Earth's leaders wanted to know everything about galactic technology, trade opportunities, and military capabilities. The last item made her pause. Military capabilities. Every species she had met today seemed to think violence was impossible among intelligent beings. Elena looked out her window at the peaceful traffic of alien ships. Tomorrow she would begin learning about galactic civilization, about how nearly 1,000 different species managed to live without war. She had no idea that her human perspective would soon challenge everything the galaxy believed about peace. 3 months later, Elena had learned to navigate the massive council station without getting lost. She knew which food dispensers served things humans could eat, which observation decks offered the best views of space, and how to avoid the sections where the methane-breathing aliens lived. The translator around her neck had become like an old friend, turning the constant buzz of alien voices into words she could understand. Today was special. Elena was attending her first conflict resolution session, the famous process that had kept peace in the galaxy for 3 centuries. 2 major civilizations had a serious disagreement, and she would see how the Council handled it. The Drakmari Empire and the Silicon Confederation filled opposite sides of a smaller chamber. The Drakmari looked like giant lizards with colorful feathers, while the Silicon beings were living rocks that glowed from within. Both sides had brought dozens of delegates and mountains of data files. "The dispute concerns mining rights in the Kepler 442 system," announced the mediator, a floating jellyfish-like creature that spoke through color changes. "The Drakmari claim historical precedents based on their ancient star charts. The Silicon Confederation argues for equal access based on the doctrine of shared resources." Elena settled into the observer section, expecting to see something like the trade negotiations she remembered from Earth. Instead, what followed amazed her completely. The Drakmari delegate stood slowly, his feathered head crest displaying calm blue and green colors. "Honored mediator, respected Silicon friends, we come not to claim ownership, but to seek harmony. Our ancestors marked this system for future generations, but we understand that the universe belongs to all beings." The Silicon representative, a tall crystal formation that hummed like a tuning fork, responded with equal politeness. "Wise Drakmari cousins, we honor your ancient claims. Yet the doctrine teaches us that resources should benefit all who need them. Perhaps wisdom lies in finding a path that serves both our peoples." For the next 6 hours, Elena watched the two sides discuss their disagreement. They shared historical documents, economic projections, and philosophical arguments about the nature of ownership. Neither side raised their voice or made threats. Instead, they treated each other with the respect usually reserved for close friends. The mediator suggested several possible solutions. The Drakmari could mine the inner planets while the Silicon beings took the outer asteroids. They could alternate access every 50 years. They could form a joint mining operation and share the profits equally. "Each solution has merit," said the Drakmari delegate thoughtfully. "But perhaps we should consider the impact on future generations. What arrangement would serve our children's children best?" Elena blinked hard. On Earth, this kind of resource dispute would have led to military threats within hours. The Drakmari and Silicon beings were discussing century-long agreements as if they were planning a family dinner. After 14 hours of polite discussion, they reached a solution. Each species would mine different types of asteroids on rotating 100-year cycles. They would share research discoveries and provide mutual assistance if either side faced technical difficulties. Both delegations applauded the arrangement and thanked each other for their wisdom. Elena returned to her quarters that evening feeling confused. She accessed the Council's historical records, searching for information about past conflicts. Her computer worked for days, translating millions of documents from thousands of languages. The results shocked her. In 300 years of Council history, not a single being had died in a conflict. The worst war crime on record was something called the Ventaran mining incident, where someone had taken 3% more minerals than their permit allowed. The guilty party had apologized publicly and spent 50 years making payments to compensate for the mistake. Elena pulled up Earth's military history files, comparing them to the galactic records. Humans had fought wars before they could even travel between planets. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held off an army of thousands. World War II, where entire continents became battlefields. The colonial wars that followed humanity's first steps into space. She read about tactics and strategy, about generals who could predict enemy movements and soldiers who fought to the death for their beliefs. She studied logistics systems that could supply armies across vast distances and weapons designed for maximum destruction. The difference was staggering. Humans had spent thousands of years learning how to fight, while these aliens had spent centuries learning how to avoid fighting. Earth's history was full of heroes who won impossible battles through courage and cleverness. The galaxy's history was full of beings who solved problems through patience and compromise. Elena tried to imagine how Earth's generals would handle the Kepler 442 dispute. They would have studied the star system's strategic value, calculated the military forces needed to hold it, and planned supply lines to support long-term occupation. The idea of sharing resources with an enemy would have seemed insane. But these aliens did not think in terms of enemies. They saw neighbors and partners, beings to work with rather than fight against. It was beautiful in a way that made Elena's heart ache. She spent the next few weeks observing more council activities. Trade disputes resolved through careful negotiation. Territory boundaries adjusted to satisfy everyone involved. Scientific discoveries shared freely among all species. The galaxy really did work the way the council claimed. Elena began to understand something that disturbed her. Humans were not just different from these aliens, they were uniquely, specifically good at something the entire galaxy had forgotten how to do. Every human child knew stories about brave soldiers and clever generals. Every human nation maintained armies and weapons, even in times of peace. When Elena tried to upload Earth's military history to the Council's cultural database, the computers crashed. The translation programs could not process concepts like total war or fighting retreat or acceptable losses. These ideas simply did not exist in any galactic language. Elena stared at her computer screen, looking at error messages in dozens of alien languages. She was beginning to realize that humanity's greatest weakness might actually be their greatest strength. The galaxy had achieved perfect peace by forgetting how to fight. But what would happen when something came along that could not be reasoned with? The emergency alarms woke Elena from deep sleep. Red lights flashed in her quarters while alien voices spoke urgently through the communication system. Her translator worked frantically to keep up with overlapping announcements in hundreds of languages, but the basic message was clear. Something terrible was happening. Elena dressed quickly and rushed to the main council chamber. She had never seen the peaceful aliens in a state of panic before. Crystal beings flickered with rapid light patterns, while the gas cloud species swirled in agitated circles. Even the ancient metal architects moved with unusual speed, their glowing eyes brighter than normal. Prime Harmonizer Zethkari's energy form pulsed, with colors Elena had never seen before. Deep purples and harsh oranges that her translator said meant fear and confusion. "Fellow beings of the Council," Zethkari announced, "we face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history." A massive holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the outer edge of council space, where 17 different species had built their homeworlds. 3 of those worlds now appeared as dead gray spheres, instead of the usual blue and green of living planets. Long-range sensors have detected a previously unknown mechanical species approaching our territory, Zethkari continued. They call themselves the Devourers. They do not respond to any form of communication. They simply consume. Elena watched in horror as the display showed what remained of the 3 dead worlds. The planets had been stripped bare, their atmospheres gone, their surfaces covered with strange mechanical structures. Billions of living beings had called those worlds home just days before. "Where are the inhabitants?" asked a delegate that looked like a walking flower, its petals trembling with emotion. "Gone," Zethkari replied simply. "The Devourers appear to consume all organic matter for fuel. They leave behind only their own mechanical infrastructure." The chamber erupted in sounds of distress. Species that had never experienced war could barely comprehend what they were seeing. Elena noticed that none of them seemed angry, only sad and confused, like children who had discovered that their pet had died. "Have we attempted diplomatic contact?" asked one of the crystal singers. "All communication attempts have failed," replied a military advisor, one of the few beings in the council who studied defensive systems. "The Devourers do not respond to any known form of language, mathematics, or symbolic communication. They appear to be pure consumption machines with no interest in negotiation." Elena felt ice in her stomach as she watched the tactical display. The Devourers were not some natural disaster. They were clearly artificial constructs, built for war. Their ships moved in perfect formation, advancing steadily toward the populated worlds of the Outer Rim. They had shields, weapons, and what looked like factory ships for building more units. "What are our defensive capabilities?" Elena found herself asking. Several hundred alien heads turned toward her, surprised to hear the human probationary member speak during an emergency session. The military advisor, a crab-like being with too many eyes, looked uncomfortable. "The Council maintains peacekeeping forces for rescue operations and disaster relief. Our ships have basic defensive systems and some scientific equipment that could theoretically be weaponized, but you have no military doctrine," Elena finished. "No battle tactics, no strategic planning, no experience with actual combat." The admission hung in the air like a physical weight. These beings had the technology to build ships that could cross the galaxy in days, energy weapons that could crack planets, and shields that could deflect anything. But they had no idea how to use any of it for fighting. "We will implement Emergency Protocol 7, Zethkari announced. "All organic species in the Outer Rim territories will be evacuated immediately. The Devourers can have those worlds. Life is more precious than territory." Elena stood up so quickly her chair fell over. You're going to abandon 17 civilizations? Just give their homeworlds to these machines? What alternative do we have? Asked a gas cloud delegate, its colors shifting to confused yellows. We cannot fight beings who will not communicate. This is like trying to negotiate with a volcano or a black hole. You can fight them, Elena said, her voice carrying across the now silent chamber. You have the ships, the weapons, the technology. You just need someone who knows how to use them. The aliens looked at each other with expressions Elena was learning to read: confusion, discomfort, and something like disgust. The idea of deliberate violence was so alien to them that they could barely think about it. Ambassador Vasquez, Zethkari said gently, your species is still learning civilized behavior. We understand that primitive instincts make violence seem like a solution, but it is not the way of advanced beings. Elena pulled up her own data display showing the tactical situation. Look at their formation, she said, highlighting the devourer fleet. They're advancing in a standard phalanx pattern designed to concentrate firepower while protecting their support vessels. Those larger ships in the rear are probably command units. Take them out, and the smaller units will lose coordination. The military advisor's eye stalks twisted toward her display. How do you know this? Because humans have been fighting wars for 50,000 years, Elena said simply. We know how armies move, how to identify weak points, how to predict enemy actions. The devourers are using tactics that are thousands of years old by human standards. She manipulated the display, showing possible attack vectors and defensive positions. Your ships could hit them here, at their supply line, force them to spread out their formation. Use your speed advantage to pick off isolated units. It would take maybe a week to defeat this entire fleet. The chamber was completely silent now. Elena realized she had just described the systematic destruction of thousands of intelligent beings, and she felt no emotional conflict about it at all. The devourers were killers who had already murdered billions. Stopping them was not just acceptable, it was morally necessary. But looking at the alien faces around her, Elena saw only horror. They were looking at her the way humans might look at a dangerous predator that had somehow learned to speak. We cannot authorize violence, Zethkari said finally. It goes against everything we believe, everything we are. Surely you understand this. Elena looked around the chamber one more time, seeing fear and confusion in every alien eye. These beings were more advanced than humanity in every way except the one that mattered most right now. They had forgotten how to fight, and that forgetting was about to cost billions of lives. Then humanity formally requests immediate withdrawal from the Galactic Confederation, Elena said quietly. The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. No species had ever left the Council voluntarily. The concept was so impossible that several translation systems simply stopped working. I do not understand, Zethkari said, the energy form flickering with confusion. Elena looked directly at the Prime Harmonizer, her voice steady and cold. If the Council will not fight to protect innocent life, then humanity chooses war. The silence that followed Elena's declaration was unlike anything she had experienced. 847 different species, each with their own ways of breathing, moving, and existing, all stopped at exactly the same moment. The crystal singers ceased their harmonious vibrations. The gas clouds stopped swirling. Even the ancient metal architects stood perfectly still, their red eyes focused entirely on the human standing in the center of their chamber. Elena could hear her own heartbeat in the absolute quiet. Her translator device had nothing to work with, no alien voices to convert, no sounds to interpret. For the first time since arriving at the Council station, she was surrounded by complete silence. Prime Harmonizer. Zethkari's energy form flickered weakly, cycling through colors that Elena's translator had no words for. When the being finally spoke, its musical voice sounded strained and confused. Ambassador Vasquez, I fear our translation systems have malfunctioned. Did you say that humanity chooses war? Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything. Yes, Prime Harmonizer. Humanity formally declares war on the devourers. The chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens began speaking, singing, flashing lights, and releasing chemical signals all at once. Elena's translator gave up trying to convert the overwhelming flood of communication, simply displaying error messages in dozens of languages. A delegate that looked like a walking tree raised its branches for attention. Its voice, when translated, sounded like wind through leaves. This is impossible. War is not a choice civilized beings can make. It is a primitive behavior that advanced species outgrow. The devourers have already made that choice for us, Elena replied, her voice carrying clearly through the noise. They declared war when they consumed 3 worlds and murdered billions of innocent beings. The only question is whether we respond to their declaration or pretend it does not exist. Zethkari's form pulsed with rapid color changes. But the doctrine of harmonious coexistence clearly states that all conflicts can be resolved through discussion and compromise. There must be a way to communicate with these devourers. Elena activated her personal data display, showing images from the destroyed worlds, dead planets stripped of all life, covered with mechanical structures that pulsed with unnatural energy. What would you discuss with them? What compromise would bring back the billions they have already killed? A crystalline being near the front of the chamber spoke up, its voice like breaking glass. Perhaps they simply do not understand that their actions cause harm. If we could explain the value of life, they understand perfectly, Elena interrupted. They are machines designed for consumption. They do what they were built to do, just as a fire burns and water flows. You cannot negotiate with their nature any more than you can argue with gravity. The chamber fell quiet again as the aliens tried to process this concept. Elena realized they genuinely could not understand the idea of conflict without communication. Their entire civilization was based on the assumption that all intelligent beings wanted to find peaceful solutions. Even if what you say is true, said a delegate that looked like a floating jellyfish, how could violence solve anything? Fighting only creates more destruction, more death. Elena pulled up a new display showing human military history. Images of ancient battles, tactical diagrams, strategic analyses that her computer had translated into formats the aliens could understand. For 50,000 years, humans have studied war. We understand strategy, logistics, combined arms tactics, and the psychology necessary to defeat an enemy that cannot be reasoned with. The images showed concepts that had no equivalent in galactic civilization: flanking maneuvers, supply line interdiction, feints and deceptions, coordinated assaults. Elena watched alien faces try to process military doctrine that was utterly foreign to their experience. You would deliberately harm other beings? Asked a Drakmari delegate, its feathered crest displaying colors that meant horror and disbelief. To protect innocent life? Without hesitation, Elena replied. The Council has the ships, the weapons, the technology to stop the devourers. You have energy weapons that could destroy their entire fleet in hours. You simply do not know how to use them effectively. She manipulated her display, showing the current tactical situation. The Devourer fleet continued its steady advance toward populated worlds while evacuation ships struggled to move billions of refugees. At their current rate, 14 more civilizations would lose their homeworlds within the next month. Your ships are faster than theirs, Elena continued, highlighting key points on the tactical map. Your shields are stronger, your weapons more powerful, but you approach them like a natural disaster to be endured rather than an enemy to be defeated. You could stop them, but you choose not to. The military advisor, the crab-like being with too many eyes, scuttled forward nervously. Even if we possessed such knowledge, the doctrine forbids organized violence. No council member has ever violated this principle. Then humanity will withdraw from council space and handle this crisis according to our own methods, Elena said firmly. We will not stand by and watch genocide because your laws forbid effective action. Panic rippled through the chamber as delegates realized the implications. A species withdrawing from the council would automatically be classified as hostile, but Elena was talking about protecting the very worlds the council was abandoning. Zethkari's energy form brightened with urgency. Withdrawal would make humanity enemies of the Confederation. You would be forbidden from council space, cut off from galactic civilization. Better to be enemies fighting for justice than friends who enable murder, Elena replied. Humanity will not abandon innocent beings to save our own diplomatic status. The ancient architect delegate spoke for the first time in Elena's memory, its mechanical voice echoing through the chamber. In the early days before the doctrine, some species possessed military capabilities. None approached the sophistication this human describes. Elena felt a chill of realization. These beings had not just chosen peace, they had systematically forgotten how to fight. 3 centuries of the doctrine had erased all knowledge of warfare from galactic civilization. They were like children who had never seen violence, unable to recognize it even when it threatened to destroy them. The Galactic Council faces a choice, Elena said, looking directly at Zethkari's swirling energy form. You can maintain your doctrine and watch 17 civilizations die, or you can temporarily suspend the doctrine and grant humanity emergency military authority to resolve this crisis. The suggestion was revolutionary beyond anything in Council history. Grant a single species military authority, suspend the doctrine that had brought 3 centuries of peace. Several delegates began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of disbelief. What you suggest is impossible, Zethkari said finally. The doctrine is the foundation of our civilization. Without it, we would return to the chaos and violence of primitive times. Elena smiled grimly. Or you would discover that sometimes civilization must be defended by those willing to fight for it. Sometimes peace can only be preserved by those who understand war. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering her final argument. Humanity requests full council membership, not as peaceful trading partners, but as your military arm. We will handle conflicts that cannot be resolved through diplomacy. We will be your weapon when weapons become necessary. The chamber erupted in the loudest debate Elena had ever witnessed. Conservative factions argued that authorizing violence would corrupt the council's moral foundation. Progressive voices countered that extinction was hardly moral. The discussion raged for hours, with translation systems struggling to keep up with heated exchanges in hundreds of languages. Finally, Zethkari called for order. The energy being's form had grown brighter, more focused than Elena had ever seen it. Ambassador Vasquez, if granted this unprecedented authority, would humanity guarantee the protection of all council space? Elena nodded gravely. Humanity will become your shield and your sword. We will ensure that no force threatens council civilization, whether external invaders like the devourers or internal conflicts that exceed diplomatic solutions. But we will do so as equals, not as probationary members. The vote was the closest in council history. 424 in favor, 423 opposed. By a margin of 1 vote, humanity became the Galactic Council's first authorized military force. The vote tally appeared in holographic letters above the chamber. 424 in favor, 423 opposed. Elena stared at the numbers, hardly believing what had just happened. By a single vote, humanity had gone from probationary members to the galaxy's first authorized military force. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Around the chamber, aliens began to understand what they had just done. Some delegates celebrated the decision with flashing lights and harmonious songs. Others sat in stunned silence, clearly regretting their choice. A few had already left the chamber, unwilling to be part of what they saw as the end of galactic civilization. Prime Harmonizer. Zethkari's energy form pulsed with colors Elena had never seen before. Deep blues mixed with silver streaks that her translator said meant profound change and uncertain future. The ancient being spoke slowly, each word carefully chosen. By the authority granted to me by the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby granted full membership with emergency military powers. Ambassador Vasquez, your species now bears responsibility for the defense of 847 civilizations. We pray you prove worthy of our trust. Elena felt the magnitude of the moment. Every human who had ever lived, from ancient warriors fighting with bronze swords to modern admirals commanding star fleets, had led to this moment. Humanity's violent history, their greatest shame, had become their most valuable gift to the galaxy. She activated her communication device, sending an encrypted message to Earth. The signal would take 3 days to reach home, but when it did, humanity would mobilize for its first interstellar war. Admiral Chen would receive tactical command, General Rodriguez would handle ground operations, and Dr. Sarah Kim would coordinate the technological integration with alien ships and weapons. How long before human forces can reach the combat zone? Asked the military advisor, his crab-like form clicking nervously. Elena did quick calculations in her head. Our fastest ships can reach the outer rim in 6 days. We will need 3 days to analyze your technology and integrate our tactical systems. The devourers will be engaged within 10 days. Several aliens made sounds of amazement. The Council's evacuation plans called for 3 months of careful preparation. Humans were talking about launching a military campaign in less than 2 weeks. What will you need from us? Zethkari asked. Complete technical specifications for your ships and weapon systems, Elena replied, already composing her requirements list. Real-time sensor data from the combat zone, and permission to modify your vessels according to human military doctrine. The last request caused another stir among the delegates. Council ships were designed for exploration and peaceful contact, not warfare. Elena was talking about turning them into something they were never meant to be. What modifications? Asked the Crystal Singer delegate, its harmonics nervous. Elena pulled up tactical schematics she had been working on during the long hours of council debates. Your energy shields are incredibly strong but not designed for rapid frequency changes. We will modify them to resist the Devourer's plasma weapons. Your engines are fast, but positioned for efficiency rather than maneuverability. We will add attitude thrusters for combat maneuvering. She highlighted more changes on her display. Your weapons are powerful but designed for precision work like asteroid mining. We will recalibrate them for rapid-fire patterns and area denial. Most importantly, we will install military communication networks so human commanders can coordinate your fleets effectively. The modifications were extensive, but Elena knew they were necessary. Council technology was decades ahead of humanity's, but it was built by beings who had never considered its military applications. Human engineers would need to essentially teach these peaceful tools how to fight. When this crisis ends, asked a gas cloud delegate, what happens to these modifications? What happens to humanity's military authority? Elena had been dreading this question. The answer would define humanity's role in the galaxy for centuries to come. That depends on the Council, she said carefully. Humanity did not seek this responsibility, but we will not abandon it lightly. As long as threats exist that cannot be resolved through diplomacy, you will need someone willing to fight. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who were still struggling to understand what they had created. The universe is vast and full of unknowns. The devourers may not be the last species you encounter that sees violence as a tool. Humanity offers to be your answer to such threats. Zethkari's form pulsed thoughtfully. And if we decide, after this crisis, that we no longer want military forces in council space, then humanity will respect that decision, Elena replied. But we hope you will remember that sometimes peace can only be preserved by those willing to fight for it. Over the next few hours, Elena worked with alien scientists to prepare for humanity's arrival. Council ships began moving toward rendezvous points where human engineers could install their modifications. Sensor networks provided real-time intelligence on devourer movements. Most importantly, evacuation efforts continued while military preparations began. Elena returned to her quarters late that night, exhausted but unable to sleep. She stood at her window, watching alien ships move through space with new purpose. Tomorrow, some of those vessels would be armed and dangerous for the first time in their existence. Peaceful beings would learn to wage war because humanity had shown them it was necessary. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen, his expression serious but determined. Elena, we have received your message. The fleet is already preparing for departure. Initial force will consist of 200 ships and 50,000 personnel. Elena felt a mix of pride and sadness. 50,000 human soldiers, trained for war since childhood, coming to fight for species they had never met. It was the most human thing she could imagine, fighting for strangers simply because it was right. Admiral, the aliens have technology decades ahead of ours, but they know nothing about military strategy. You will essentially be teaching an entire galaxy how to fight. Chen nodded grimly. Understood. We are bringing our best tactical experts and combat engineers. If these devourers want a war, they will learn why humans are very good at giving people wars. As the transmission ended, Elena looked out at the stars once more. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the devourers continued their advance toward innocent worlds. They were machines designed for consumption, built to destroy everything in their path. But they had made one critical mistake. They had threatened beings under human protection. Elena smiled for the first time in days. The devourers had probably encountered thousands of species in their mechanical existence. They had learned to overcome shields and weapons and desperate defenses mounted by beings fighting for their lives. But they had never encountered humans. They had never faced a species that had turned warfare into an art form, that had spent millennia learning how to win impossible battles through courage and cleverness. The galaxy was about to discover something that humanity had always known. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be very, very good at war. In 10 days, the devourers would learn why humans were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever welcomed into its embrace. They would discover that some prey fought back with fangs and claws and the accumulated military wisdom of 50,000 years. Elena watched the stars and waited for humanity to arrive. The real war was about to begin.